A life estate is ownership based upon somebody's life. Meaning that I'm the owner of this property so long as a person that we name is alive. And that could be anybody. It could be the seller of the property. It could be the buyer of the property. It could be a son or a cousin or an aunt or some personality, whatever. Just, we're saying that I have the property and I'm going to sell it to you. I'm going to give it to you, whatever. You get it now. It's yours. It's your home. You get to live there. But this person over here, or me, or you, whichever, some party we name that says that your ownership lasts as long as that person that we've named is alive. So if it's me and I die, then you don't get it anymore. If we name this other person over here and they die, you don't get it anymore. If we named you, you die, obviously you don't get it anymore. But also your heirs don't get it, things like that. So life estate is very complex. There's a lot more into this than what we're getting into in here. I just need you to grasp that first concept, is that it's ownership, but it's temporary. We're hoping if I'm the buyer of this property, if I'm the owner of the property, I'm investing in life support and vitamins, and we're going to cook healthy meals for that person. Can I deliver you some really natural food? I want you to live as long as I can possibly get you to live, because as long as you're alive, I get to be the owner. But if you pass away, then it's no longer mine. I no longer get to have that property. So that's the general idea of a life estate. That this is where life estates get extremely complicated, because there are so many layers that you can add into it with things that you've talked about. I mean, we've dealt with situations where I'm a life estate, I'm not, but I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, I'm a life estate owner. It's my property, and my ownership is done when this other party passes away. They haven't passed away yet, but I don't want to be the owner anymore. I'm done messing with it. I can sell this to somebody else. I could sell it to anybody. But what they're buying is what I have, and that what they're buying is this other, as long as this other person's alive. So they get it. It's their home, just like it was my home. So they get to have it, but they're only buying it. It's basically temporary, because as soon as that person passes, it goes away with them, just like it would have gone away with me. So there's a lot of things in there and the life estate can be established such that I couldn't do that. It might say that, Brian, you're the owner, but you can't sell it. You can't do that. Again, this can get really big. So it's all just about what the parties agree to, what do they want to have happen. But generally speaking, it's based upon somebody's life. Usually what we'll see here is that this is done between family members. And not to say that it can't be anything else. It can be complete strangers. But usually what we see here is that you'll have family members. Like I always use the example that my dad, he has a house here in Indiana, and he has a house down in Florida. Maybe he doesn't want to live in Florida anymore. Maybe he doesn't want to live in Indiana anymore, whatever. And so he says, Brian, you get to have this property as long as I'm alive. And when Dad passes, then I don't get the home anymore. So that would be an example of a life estate. Or he might say, Brian, you get the property as long as Brian is alive. And Brian passes away, and he doesn't get to own the property anymore. So we usually find it between family members, because it is temporary. Nobody lives forever. So at some point, this person that we've identified will pass. And when they do, that life estate is over with, the ownership ends, and now we're dealing with what happens. So I see a couple questions. Let me get through this, and it might answer your questions. If not, then we'll get to it. So at the bottom of life estate, there are two parties that we recognize. So what we're saying, what I'm saying, is that the life estate says that I own the property, it's mine, until this person passes. When they pass, we look at what happens to that property. Who does it go to? Because I'm the life estate holder. I got it, but I only get it so long as this person is alive. They've passed, now it's not mine, but who gets it? So the life estate would determine that. And we're looking at, is it that we have a remainder interest, or is it what's called a reversionary interest? So a remainder interest means that the property goes to some other party. So in a life estate, we have the owner of the property, and we have the life estate tenant, or the holder of it, the person that's in there. So let's add an example. Dad has the property in Florida. Says, Brian, you get to use it as long as Dad is alive. When Dad passes, Brian no longer gets to be the owner of it. So Dad might set it up as a remainder interest, meaning that Dad says, I get to have it as long as he's alive. Dad passes, now where does it go? The remainder interest would be somebody else. My brother, my sister, his wife, whatever. Goes to this other party, not my dad and not me. So that would be the remainder interest, is a party that's outside of the owner and transferor. So that would be the remainder interest. The reversionary interest means it comes back to the person that created this life estate. So in that case, it's back to my dad. So Dad might set up the life estate a little bit differently. Maybe he says, instead of, if Dad passes, then Brian doesn't own it anymore, goes to this other person. It might be that Dad says, Brian, you get to have the property. But if you pass away, Brian, the life estate ends and it comes back to Dad. Goes back to him. So he gets it back. It's called the reversionary interest. It reverts back to the person that created and transferred that property in the life estate. So it's, again, I know it's confusing. I don't have a good way to help you with that. But the remainderment is it goes to somebody else. The reversionary is that it comes back to the person that was the original owner, the person that created this life estate. In either case, Brian's not the owner anymore. Either one, remainder or reversionary, it doesn't matter. Somebody passed away and Brian isn't the owner of it anymore. So it's just, where does it go to? If it's remainder, it goes to somebody else. Not to Brian, not to Dad, somebody else. Or somebody passed away, Brian isn't the owner anymore, and it goes back to Dad in reversionary. On page 25 at the top, they get into what's called a legal life estate. So these are things that are usually established just by operation of law, what we call statutory rules, meaning that they're created by legislatures. So what they recognize, and Indiana has a version of this, the terms that we get into are what's called the courtesy rights and dower rights. What we're looking at here is when we have married couples, that if one of the partners in the marriage passes, that outside of a will, outside of all these things, the spouse gets the property. So it recognizes that even though we may have two partners that own the property, I'm sorry, that's not what I mean. Two partners that are married, one of them owns the property, that person passes away, their spouse gets it because of a dower or courtesy right that just is automatically set up. I don't have to have a will. I don't have to have anything like that. I probably would, it'd be smart to, because I want to direct what happens. But these legal life estates are set up such that, similar to a life estate, as we've talked about, somebody passes, so what happens to that property? Just these are automatically set up. This is not a document that's created. This is not something that the partners have created. This is just something that the state has already established. So when the person passes, when the spouse passes, the surviving spouse gets the property, just because that's the way that the law is established. Or it could be that, the spouse gets part of it and children get part of it. There's variations of this. And that's kind of where Indiana sits. But it's just that legal, statutory, legislative law that's on the books that says, here's what happens. You don't have to say anything. This is just what happens.